welcome to the Overprepared DM podcast. My name's Jen.
My name is Nick.
And we are here with a lovely DM, Aaron, from QuestVault.
Well, hello there.
Hello.
Welcome.
Welcome in.
Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Guys, Aaron, as I said, is a DM for QuestVault, which is a Dungeons & Dragons stream on Twitch. They stream Dungeons & Dragons on Fridays at 6:30 p.m. PDT. PST, depending on what time of year you're listening to this. But, Aaron, you want to tell them a little bit more about you, where they can find you, and anything you want to talk about QuestVault, or anything at all.
All right. I've been DMing for, somewhere around 10 years now, off and on for most games. A lot of my games run very long, so I'm kind of a long-form DM, so I don't do very short campaigns, something that would take maybe 2 months or up to 6. Usually my games take a couple of years. So my current campaign, which is running, is actually 2.5 years old, and it probably has another half a year to go. But I've definitely run games longer. So, I guess,
That's awesome.
I guess I have a style, and I'm sticking to it.
You and I both.
Yeah, Nick does long-form campaigns, and
Yes.
I guess Nick always starts us off with the same question. Let's do it.
Same question. So, 10 years, a long time.
Yes.
What's one thing that you did when you first started DMing that you don't do anymore? One thing that you're like, this is stupid. I'm killing myself doing this. I'm not doing it ever again.
Over-preparing.
Well, that's a good...
As the name of this podcast implies, yes, that is exactly what you do when you're new. I bet 90% of all new DMs over-prepare.
Oh,
Anything specific? Any little technique that you tried that you thought would be cool first starting out that you don't do anymore? I'll give my example every week. I tried to fill in every building in a city.
Yep.
Oof. Oh,
Yeah.
gosh.
I tried, and when I was over-preparing, I wrote the campaign from start to end with every single possible thing that someone could possibly roll for every single action. I tried to have it pre-written, and that is a mess and a half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say naming every NPC.
Oh, boy.
Everybody. Down to the bouncer at the bar.
Yep.
To random... like Henry, the local bum, who just kind of walks around in the street.
Yeah.
Who are you? Yeah.
Did you
What's
also
your
give
name?
those people backstories, or just names, so you never came across that issue of what's their name?
I hated getting the "what's your name" question early on, mostly because the players that I was playing with at the time were also relatively new, and so they assumed that any NPC that spoke was important.
Oh no!
And so I really had to kind of come up with those things on the fly to try to be like, hey, he's just Henry the bum. He just lives in this alley. Would you like a fish? You're like. They'd be like, the fish is important. And I'm like, no, it's not. But,
Oh no! I think the best thing that I've done since naming every NPC and doing all those things would be having a name bank
Yeah.
with my favorite names for each race. That also led to a lot of overlap because I really enjoy certain names, and I'm like, this person's also named that because my name bank has now been expensed. It's gone.
yes, that's when you have the
Timothy the Second.
Yeah, or you have the organization of Tonys who run the bars, known as Tony's Liquor.
This comes up
Hey,
so much.
Tony, I own this bar, and they're like, wait, weren't you in the other town? You're like, no, that's my brother.
That comes up so much. I talk about the Officer Jenny situation with Pokemon.
Yeah.
If anyone listening is knowledgeable about Pokemon, there's the same looking, acting, voice acted character in every single police station and nurses, and hospital. Nurse Jenny and Officer Joy, and And I do that with my campaigns too. They're the same bar or the same general place that someone would go to, like my store called You Didn't Know You Needed It. It's always run by a Fearbolg named Henry. Speaking of Henry.
Yes.
But it's spelt Hehnree because it's D&D.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. How do you spell that? It's not the way you thought.
Nope.
Trust me.
See,
There's
actually,
a few extra syllables in there.
you mentioned something while you were talking about what you overprepared for, and you mentioned like PCs getting hooked on like unimportant NPCs.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be good to talk about like what do you do during that situation? How do we differentiate between important NPCs and not important NPCs? And how do we like show players that like not everyone you talk to is important? Like making the world feel lived in.
Well, every NPC that you kind of bring in is at least somewhat important. Mostly because, like you said, you want the world to feel lived in. You want people to walk around and see, oh, there's this guy selling dates on the side of the road. There's another guy selling leather that he tanned, you know. And as you're kind of describing those things, those players are probably going to interact with one or two of those characters just because I want to buy some leather. I want to make something later. And so then they talk to that character, and so that character becomes something more. And it really depends, I would say, like what characters are important, what characters are not, based upon the player's reaction to that character. If they come in to a conversation and they're talking to Henry, I'll use that analogy again, the street man, just kind of living in the alleyway, and he's like, hey, you want a fish? And then they buy his fish and then like sell it and then bring him back the money from it, and like they really get to know this character and like want to help him succeed and be better, and like obviously that character is going to become more important because the players are interested in them,
right?
And like making them more important is a good thing for you to do. It's something to kind of expect, I suppose. But if you have a very important NPC like that you planned to be very important, and the players just have no interest in this character whatsoever, then maybe it's a good idea to shift that character's kind of importance to a character that they do like. So that way they do move forward with the story, or they do move forward with the quest that you have, because that character that they're interested in is now the person that's involved. And it's just a good idea to kind of keep the game flowing that way.
Definitely. Nick, what do you think? I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, and that's definitely kind of a little bit of a segue for me there. Just something for new DMs to consider is, it's your job as a DM to break your players' hearts, and they're going to thank you for it. They're going to thank you for the great story. Just prepare yourself to have your heart broken and not be thankful for it. He was saying, you are going to create what you're going to think is going to be the best NPC ever, and your players aren't even going to care. So just prepare yourself for that. But yeah, the unimportant NPC on the side of the road that winds up hanging out with the party more, that could be a story hook. Obviously, the players want to interact with this person more. Maybe your dragon raid that you're planning for and super hyped up for, that is kind of cliche. Maybe put that on the back burner and deal with that later and develop a story with this new guy. Maybe he is a dragon. Who knows? But that's... expect to take things in different directions sometimes, just because your players are going to, like I said, they're going to break your heart, and they're going to fall in love with something that you didn't love. But there's room for it. Definitely run with it, though.
Yeah, I think being moldable as a DM is just generally important. But let's say that I have this DM, or I have this character, and I'm the DM, and I have been dreaming about having this person in a campaign. Some things that you could do, I guess, would be to talk about that character on the sidelines through other NPCs. Get their name in the players' minds. Really kind of, if they interact with this person and go, that person sucks, we're heart shattered, but also you can talk about maybe something in the future, like a direct question about this person, like, hey, have you ran into this person? Like, brings it up in that mind, and it gives them a little bit of a poke to learn more about that person, or maybe learn how to like them if they don't like them.
On that same vein, if you have an NPC that you really love and you have really planned out this NPC to be super fun, and you don't feel like that fun has come across to the players, and they like just really shut it down, they don't want to involve themselves with this character, consider why they might not have wanted to interact with this character. Because it's entirely possible that maybe when you presented the character that it was something that they weren't prepared for, or something that they're just not ready for at that particular point in time, and so they're like, we'll come back to it later. They might have liked it at the moment but not expressed it simply because they're in the middle of something else. And that could 100% be, or it could be that perhaps how you presented it could have been a bit too much at the time. And so, like, if you listen to your players and you talk to your players afterwards, like, hey, how do you think about this? What do you think about this? Like, what was your favorite NPC of today? And chances are one of them's going to be like, oh man, I love that character that you brought in the other time. And that could help you kind of inform you about how to bring that character back a bit better. Because usually the players are far more open to talk to you about what they love and what they didn't like, but they're going to tell you what they loved more than what they didn't like.
That's true. I think, being able to branch out, let go of specific names and specific faces, and bringing that story along from character to character really also helps with world building. Because then you kind of have to craft a different section of this world that you didn't originally plan, which ultimately just helps you in the future if you plan to use the same world again. But what do you guys think about, I guess what do you think about, like, putting yourself, or, oh my gosh, building the world around where the characters are walking, or building prior to them walking in that world, or a section of the world? Mr. World Builders.
Would you like to take this one first, or?
Go ahead, please. You're the guest.
World building takes time, and it also takes your players. You can't have a world without your players. Like, your original design will have to change, and it will change spontaneously as your players add things and change things. So, like with the NPCs, like if someone makes a decision and they bring their character in, they say, hey, I want to get involved with this particular type of event, or I want my character to be part of a cult and have gotten out of that, and they're trying to better themselves. That's something that you should work into your world. Like, have your world react to what that cult is about. Do they realize it's there? And as someone who draws their own maps, as someone who kind of takes the time to put the game world into a visual state, oftentimes the original idea that I have for an area isn't true by the time that the players are in the game world, simply by virtue of listening to what the players' introductory kind of descriptions of their characters are. And I feel like when you're creating your world, you do come up with ideas, but you shouldn't nail something into stone. You should never 100% mold this steel and be unbreakable about it. Because your players will want to get involved with the world, but you also need to make sure that they're allowed to get involved with the world.
True.
Otherwise, they're just a passive observer, and they aren't involved. They aren't part of the game.
That's true.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. At least for my games, obviously every game's different, right? But definitely, if you want your players to care about the world, it doesn't take much to make your characters love the world. But if you want your players to love the world, let them, like he was saying, let them create it with you. Down to if you're doing a session 0 and someone says, I'm from this village named this, from this kingdom over here, and you don't have it, have that information, just say, okay, cool, let's make that, let's build it. And it will definitely, you will see a big difference with doing that than just saying like, oh no, that doesn't exist in my world. This is how it is. This is where it can be from. Your players will love it way more if they can inform the world as well. And it's definitely better to have a framework for your world going into the game and build the world out more as you go along, as the players build with you, and it helps. It's just like the story in your campaign. It helps keep the characters invested if you can mold the campaign and the world, their preferences, their likes, and things they want to do, versus saying, oh, you guys want to go role play and be full political and just like get kingdoms, alliances, and stuff. I don't want to do that. Let's have dungeons and just big old dungeon crawls. Players are different, so just be open to that. Yeah.
Flower you picked was poisonous.
Dang it!
Yeah.
Roll a
But that's
save.
okay. The cure one is right to your right. So.
Oh, dang it.
Or is it?
Oh no,
no.
another poison. You mentioned like having a framework, and I do think that like while it is great and absolutely important to mold the world with your players in mind, you don't have to mold the world around your players.
Right.
They aren't the only ones there. And I do think that putting limitations on that is also totally fine. Because if you've spent a lot of time crafting this world, for instance, that doesn't have a specific race, or has a race, but it's limited in this area, or has a race, but blah, blah, blah. It's about, I guess, being flexible, but also having that limitation where it just wouldn't make sense. And at the end of the day, it is always okay to tell people that like they could play a different game or something like that. And it's, unless it's, of course, it's your friends, and you just got to make it work, I guess.
Well, I guess it depends on the type of game you're playing.
That's true.
So if you're just playing like a beer and peanuts, kind of just get together with a couple friends and have a good time, then limits really wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah.
Because that game is more just about getting together with your friends, and obviously you want your friends to just have a good time.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to make a big world and have a long form story, and everybody's in and agrees to want that type of game, then limits will definitely be a helpful thing to have with characters and how the world kind of flows.
I mean, do you guys have any limits in your or frameworks that you build around with your streamed campaigns?
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, don't just say yes. Elaborate, Nick.
Okay. I'll go first this time. So every story is a little different. Every region of our world is a little different. So just to give you an example of my current campaign and kind of how I let a player break the rule of said campaign. My current campaign, all magic users have to go to school and become wizards. That there's this big school that every person who has magical abilities has to go to, and then they get the warlock, the sorcerer, it's all stamped out. They become wizards. And my wife wanted to play a sorcerer, and I was like, okay, a sorcerer she wanted to play a sorcerer whose parents were nobility, and I was like, okay, that wouldn't work. That would not work out. She would be sent to school, but how? How did it work? How did that rule get broken? And she came up with this great idea that she was raised to be a ranger. She was taught to be a ranger. Her parents raised her that way. And when they first started the campaign, she tried to shoot shit with that bow and missed all the time. So it was a cool, character building, character growth moment for her to come out with the magic. And now she's this pretty powerful sorcerer who just kills stuff with her magic now. But the framework was cool to start, but letting her break that rule made my world a little bit better. It's a
Definitely.
good way to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as the DM, you're not always correct. You do always have the last say.
Yes.
True.
Aaron, what
given...
about the limitations in your campaign?
Yeah. Most of the limitations I have are based on regions, kind of like what Nick was saying there. Was like in certain regions you're going to find more of this type of persons, and you're going to find this type of personality in this kind of area. And I've had in the Quest Vault campaign, one of the player characters decided that he wanted his character to be from the nation that is very cruel and apathetic to the poor and really kind of almost laughably evil. But he wanted his character to be this paragon of justice and love. And through the course of kind of conversing with him, like how is this possible? Where are you coming from? And he determined that his character was just going to be a merchant. Like he was like, I'm going to be the son of a merchant, just random merchant guy. The reason why the way he is because as a merchant he travels, and so he leaves that country and he goes to the other countries and he sees how they react, and he has to be cordial to those people and like learn their customs. And so he likes that way better. And so that's why when he comes back home, he's not like the rest of the people around his hometown. And I thought that was really nice. And what the limitations are they're good for is they're there to kind of give sense of the world state, how characters are going to perceive you, how to perceive your actions, or perceive like how the PCs work about their daily kind of adventure, I suppose. And kind of lifting those limitations gives that player a bit more freedom, and it also gives them a bit more agency in determining how they want the world to see them. Because that character constantly has to deal with people being like, oh, you're from that country? Get away from me. And then they walk away because they expect him to be a terrible person. And that's the kind of experience that player crafted. That's how they wanted to play. And so far he has vastly enjoyed it. So I feel like that type of kind of lifting of the limitation is something that you learn as you DM.
Yeah.
And as you go through games, you start to get different players who want a different type of experience, and allowing them to do that and helping them reach that goal in a sensible way is a really kind of good skill to have.
Definitely. It brings me to want to question, like having that group of individuals who may want different experiences. How do we bend and mold and make sure that we don't just turn someone away for not wanting to play the way that we want to play? What do you think, Nick?
That is a very good question. It all depends. If it's a brand new party you've never DM'd before, session 0, ask straight up, what do you want to do in this campaign?
Yeah.
Ask each one individually, if you can do separate, or just like chat online, whatever. But try to get everyone's unbiased opinion on how they would like to play D&D, and craft moments when you can to suit certain players, so that way they don't feel like they're being left out.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean to like make sure that every person has a crafted moment every session. If you're playing like we do 3 hours at a time, not going to have time for that. But just make sure that every few sessions, there's a big moment where the role player gets this villain where they have no chance of beating the guy or girl or monster, whatever, but this role player has a chance to talk their way out of it. Or if you have somebody who wants to fight things one-on-one, put a pit fight somewhere in the world every so often so they can go in and fight something one-on-one, because that's getting up a lot of time. But you just have to find out. Ask people, and if they don't know right off the bat, you'll find out throughout the campaign. And be open to hearing feedback. Be open to having them tell you, hey, that was fun, but I kind of want to do more of this, and go with it.
Yeah, most definitely. I really want to emphasize what you started with, which was talk to your players.
Yes.
That's rule number one. Very beginning, session 0, talk to your players. Session 1, talk to your players. Session 2, talk to your players. Like at the end of every single session, like maybe throughout the next couple days afterwards, or however long you have between games, ask them, hey, how is it going so far? How do you like your character so far? They'll tell you. Oh man, I played this wizard so that I could blast things, and I'm really excited for that moment when I could just throw that fireball at the big group of enemies. Well, maybe next time you throw a big group of enemies at them.
Yeah.
Like, you prepare. Like, they're going to tell you exactly what they want. And so for you, that's as easy as listening to what they're saying to you individually, and then saying, okay, where can I put that in? And then kind of finding spaces and kind of pacing that out. So that way it's not always, oh, here we go again. It's another big group. Here comes the wizard with his fireball. Like maybe in between those big groups, throw a couple singles. And so those single guys are great for taking down the barbarian. And so you're constantly keeping them on the toes and kind of keeping the barbarian entertained because he wants to hit something really hard and the wizard wants to fireball. And each player is going to want different things. So speaking to them after every session or as often as you can individually is really helpful. But there's nothing saying that you can't speak to them as a team. Because in essence, the players are a team. They want to talk to each other about the game too. So after you speak to everybody individually, feel free to speak to them together as a group and say, hey guys, what was your favorite thing about the last couple episodes or the last couple sessions we've done? And they'll tell you. They'll start going off back and forth, and they'll start sharing stories about things. And as they talk about that, as they share their stories, kind of mentally take notes of what they're talking about. Is it, oh man, we love that NPC, and the 3 hours we spent just talking to this guy, he was super fun, we loved that. Oh, well, maybe I should have more NPCs for them to talk to in the future. But, oh, what about this other moment when this character jumped off a cliff and double knifed the giant ogre or something? Like, okay, well, perhaps they would like some more moments for those characters to be able to do those things. And then listening to that conversation and using that to kind of inform your decisions into the future about the design of future encounters, both roleplay and combat.
You can also go the silent route. Not fully, but you can listen to them talking to each other without actually saying anything and come up with some surprises based on their general conversation and excited chatter while they think you're not listening or paying attention.
Oh, yeah.
I know.
There's nothing better than a player giving you the answer to the thing that you were hoping for.
One of my players came over a couple weeks ago. She was actually here today, too, but she came over a couple weeks ago, and her and my wife were literally sitting right over here to my left, from where I usually DM, and they were doing crafty stuff, and they were hanging out and talking, and the conversation went to D&D. I paused the game I was playing, and I just sat and I listened. And that you can if you just listen, you'll find out what they love, what they like, and you can pet your ego a little bit. It's kind of nice.
Right. I have DM'd many a group. I have notably DM'd a group full of murder hobos. So I walked into this game with people in person. It was very fun. It was one of the, the peanuts and beers and hanging out type of games. So it wasn't super serious, but I came in overprepared and very serious. And I had this whole thing laid out. I looked at all their character sheets and all their 2-sentence backstories, and I made story arc after story arc after story arc, and every single time they just went to the bounty board and found something. I always told them that the bounty board was blank. I'm like, no, move on with what I wrote for you. And then eventually over time, I just learned, I'm like, all right, I'm not listening to them at this point. Like, I'm doing what I want to do, and they want to go to the bounty board and kill some goblins. Like, that are terrorizing the chickens downtown. Who knows? Like, there's things in that sense of, like, letting go. And then I've also, on our streamed campaign, which is Fateful Encounters, we do after game favorite parts, not necessarily chatting like QuestVault does for sure.
After game chat.
We talk about what our favorite parts were, and that is when the DM notes go off. I'm like, ooh, they really liked that, or they skipped over something that I thought they really liked. Like maybe they didn't. So those are really, really important, and also it's a good opportunity to get like feedback from them, and also from people who are maybe watching your stream if you are a streamer as well. But what about your after game chats? What do you guys talk about as well?
Well,
as favorite
with
parts?
QuestVault, we have a what we call question time, which is typically after game chat. We'll start up. We'll start talking to whoever happens to be in the text chat on the Twitch stream, and if there's no questions being asked almost immediately, typically I'll ask a question, or if another player has a question about the game, they'll ask me, and then we'll kind of pass that around until it kind of runs its course. Most of the time, the questions that we usually ask are, what was the most interesting interaction you saw today? Whether that be in combat or RP, like what's the most interesting interaction? And a lot of times the players will talk about another player. They don't typically talk about their own interaction, but that also opens up somebody else to talk about their interaction. And so then you start getting this kind of group talk about what their most interesting and most like memorable moments are. And those are always good kind of conversation starters, or if a player has a question to me about how a particular scenario kind of went, or whether or not that scenario was planned differently because it looked like it went the opposite direction. Those are also great conversation starters because you can give a little bit of information about what might have happened without committing to anything. And oftentimes they will run wild with it.
Right.
But,
no, those are great questions to ask your players for sure.
Yeah. And all I do after every session, we go offline, I will say something along the lines of, goddamn monk stunned the vampire, and you guys walked right through it, and the next thing you know, they're talking about how that worked and their plan, and then it just branches. It just branches from there. Or I will say something along the lines of like, oh man, you guys were so close to all dying, even though they probably weren't. And they'll just they start talking about it, and it just branches. So I just give them a push, and the lovely ladies, the crit chicks, will just start talking about it, and I listen to every word. And if we play here, when we're playing in person, as we walk out the door, I'll say something like that, and they'll talk all the way out the door about, and I just listen. That's all I do. Yep.
Oh yeah, I think one of my favorites has been, man, that's gonna have repercussions later. Yeah. And then they all go, what? And then they start chatting away about, what is that gonna mean? Oh, I think it's gonna be this. No, it's gonna be that. And that's just, it's really nice to hear that as a DM, because that means that they're thinking about it and they're engaged, they're having fun.
Or if it's something that you haven't thought about and they're like, that's gonna suck, you're like, time to write that out. Like, yep. time to provide a repercussion.
Make that a reality.
Yeah. But how often, speaking of that specifically, how often do you guys take on someone's idea for a story and like scrap what you've had and that's it now?
I suppose it depends. Because some quests have a bit more to them, like there's more characters involved and there's more kind of wider implications to it. Yeah. And then there's smaller quests, like the smaller quests that have like one or two NPCs involved or 1-2 things going on. If a player comes up with an amazing idea that they're like, oh man, that's what it is, I know exactly what's going to happen, and it's one of those smaller quests, 100%. Like,
that's now it.
That's exactly what's going to happen. You figured it out. You're so good.
Good job.
You know? If it's one of the bigger quests, it's more like, okay, well, here you'll get a piece of that, you know? But in the end, it still ends up following the kind of arc. But a lot of the time, it's better to take the player's enthusiasm and send it back to them than
For
not.
sure.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Like you were saying, it's if it's larger implications, it's hard to take that. And sometimes it's better to be wrong as a player, as someone who's digesting the story. If you think it's going one way and you get something out of left field and you weren't expecting it, that can be better. So definitely there's a balance to it, and it can be very difficult to traverse, but just think about the implications of either one, and which one gives you that more of a wow, or that's a hard question to answer, because there's a lot of finesse to it, and it's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
But if you don't have anything planned, it's great. But if if they give you something that's like, ooh, that would be really, really good. I may have done that maybe 3 or 4 times instead of DMing total, but it was always like, God, yeah, that would be fucking awesome. So let's do that. But usually the overarching story requires something else. So I let them stew in it. I know the look that I give them when I'm giving something away, so I do that look all the time now. So sometimes they think that they're right, and then they're not, and it's great.
Yeah, no, that's super fun. I, as of recently, not given the title of this podcast, but I've started improv DMing, and it's been a very eye-opening and, I want to say, successful journey. I want to say never, but I've had very good games that I wouldn't have thought of if I wasn't just rolling with it. Sometimes it goes into, I don't know, weird Candyland sort of storylines, but sometimes it's a really epic adventure, and I walk out of that and I'm just like, that came off the top of my head. So yep. I've started doing improv DMing, and it's been really fun. And that is when it comes to, like, encouraging your players to say what they want to do in the game as well. Through role play, if that's how you like to play, which is how I like to play. And really just taking that and thinking ahead and just putting something in front of them, which is kind of what they said, or not. If someone says something that sparks an idea for a completely opposite direction, do it. Go that way. Because ultimately, like, it's about having fun. But of course, the plan and things is super important if that is where you're going and that's where the expectation is. But if you're more of an improv, or if you don't have an idea of what to do for the game today, even though you know the end goal at the end of the campaign is for you guys to do this, but I don't know what to do today. It is more than okay to just wing it. Have confidence. Because your players, at the end of the day, have the ability to chat with each other and decide what they want to do, whether it be going to the bounty board or continuing something that you didn't necessarily plan, but today is the day to plan it because they're going that way. They're walking that direction. It's time to figure it out. But having the confidence, and I think improv is super important as a DM, just in general. You don't have to take improv classes. You can even just practice improv. You can, I think, ultimately, and not pushing a bounty board, but just because we've talked about it, I do think that that's a good practice item in a campaign. It's a bounty board. It's not tied to what you've written, but maybe they go and look at it and, okay, what's on there? Think about something just right off the bat. And it's like, all right, we're doing, as I mentioned, the goblins messing with the chickens downtown. And then
who stole my goat?
Who stole my goat? Yeah, something like that. And that's what you did today. And you practiced, and you know what? They had a great time not doing the main story.
Yeah.
But that's my advice, to be, free-flowing. Which is, yeah. I'm not like that all the time, definitely. I'm very overprepared in everything that I do. But the improv DMing has been very fun to do.
Well, rolling with the punches is very, very important. Being able to adapt to the players, adapt to the situation, adapt to your plan completely going out the window, or something you said as an improv that just suddenly took over.
Yeah.
Adapting is very, very important. And I also think that applies to kind of player agency, because if a player has no agency, then they obviously aren't going to enjoy it. Almost immediately, they're going to recognize that they have no agency. And as soon as a player realizes that they have no agency, they will stop enjoying the game. And if there's any advice I would give to any new DM is really pay attention to how much player agency you're giving your players. Because it's very easy to not give any player agency, but it's much harder to give the correct amount of player agency than just kind of do it all on your own. But if there's one thing that new player or new DMs tend to do a little bit too much, is they end up taking that agency away a bit too much. But it's something you learn quite quickly on your first couple teams, couple groups.
And I think another way to think about what that means is, let's say you've been a player in a game, or you've listened to people streaming or podcasts, and you feel like the DM has pushed them to a scene. They then act out that scene, and then the DM pushes them to the next scene, and then they then act out that scene, and they are then pushed to the next scene. And that is just it. They have these minimal moments where they're able to roleplay. They have these minimal moments where I've handed them an item, or the description of an item, and they have the opportunity to take it or not, and then we move forward, and we move forward, and we move forward. It really takes away that choice of, and feeling like you're playing versus acting out someone's story. Someone's pre-written, they handed you a bedtime story, and you're acting it out for the person. So it's important to kind of differentiate, let them kind of guide you, but also have that guiding bullet point list that we talked about in the last kind of podcast.
Have a scaffold, but let them build the house.
There you go.
That's perfect. Perfect analogy, for sure.
So we've talked about a lot already. We've talked about like important NPCs and random NPCs. We've talked about building the world with characters. We talked about limitations and frameworks for the world, and we've talked about like how to listen to your players. Is there anything that we can talk about for DMs not to do, just in a general form of either bullet points or conversation? What do you think, having 10 years of experience, Aaron, and I think you said 5 years of experience, Nick, 5 to 7 years, and like, we have done things that we can at least tell you, you could do them anyway, but tell you not to do. What are some things, just in general, what do you think that DMs should not do?
Don't neglect your mental health. You are just as important as any of the players. And it's okay to not be able to play a session. It's okay to tell your players, hey, I'm really feeling ill today. Like, I'm not in the right mindset. I'm not here. They will thank you for it, and you will thank yourself. It's okay to step away from a table. If you come to a game and your entire kind of party is wanting to play a game that you really are not interested in DMing, it's okay to say, I'm sorry, guys, I'm just not the type of DM for this.
Yeah.
It's okay to do good for yourself. Because if you are having fun and if you are enjoying yourself, your players will follow suit most times.
Yeah.
If you are having a good time and you're working toward having or letting your players have a good time, and everybody's in a good mood and prepared and like happy for that day, and you're not forcing yourself to do it, everyone will enjoy your game.
Oh, yeah.
But if you show up to a session and you're mentally not there, you had a really bad day at work and you got yelled at by your boss and you're really not prepared and not ready for that day, it's okay to say, not tonight, guys. I need another day or two. I need some time.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully you're not at a table like this, but don't allow players to bully you into playing anyway. You definitely, that's a super important topic, mental health and DMs being players too, to an extent. Nick, what do you think is a good don't?
Yeah, that, I mean, and I think the overarching theme of this podcast is going to be about that mental health, because when you overprepare and you take 5 days to prep for a 3-hour session, you're not leaving time to decompress, relax, not worry about the game. DMing can be taxing, physically, emotionally, psychologically. There are some games where I after we're done, I shut it down and I just go to bed and I don't think about D&D for 48 hours because it's taxing. So if you find yourself doing things that you don't have to do, like filling out every single building in every town that you build, like I used to do or tried to do and failed at, or roll your monster's health. If you roll every encounter's HP, that you're gonna go nuts.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah,
I can go off.
Yeah. You as a first time DM, you're gonna pick up the monster manual. You're gonna be like, "Oh, this is awesome. Oh, it says this dragon has how many D8? Yeah." And you're like, "Oh, I can roll that. That sounds awesome." Until you realize it takes you 7 hours to prep for a single encounter, then you back off of it. But you learn limitations. Make sure that what you prep for is what you need, and improv the rest. Improv was fun. That's part of the game. I mean, even in those moments where you have planned out and they take the bait and they go to the encounter that you have prepared, they're still going to do things that you have to improv for. So, don't stress the little things. Your characters probably aren't going to care anyway. Your players probably aren't going to care anyway. And they're going to go after a guy that they named smells farts dicks, like they did in my campaign.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh man. Side segue here, but I had a campaign where I crafted this super cool dungeon. It was like all the spirits of like these dragonborn that like ran this, and there was a dragonborn that was cursed to be there for forever, even though he's just dead. So it was a skeleton dragonborn that would walk around and be like, "Hey, how you guys doing? Do you need any help? Because I'm here for 1,000 years. Actually, I don't even know what time is anymore. How long has it been? How's it going? Actually, I don't care." It was really silly. I said that he had been there so long he forgot his name. That was a mistake, because they named him Boner. And I was so mad. But I said Boner, like, appropriately and without a smile every time I talked about this character, because they named him Boner. He took that name. He was proud of it. He's like, "I'm going to remember this for 1,000 years, maybe." And it was a really stupid. I was so mad, but it was anyway. That was my segue. Continue.
Never underestimate the power of player naming a character.
Yeah,
that's a don't.
Do yourselves a favor, guys. When you're naming NPCs, say the names out loud.
Yeah,
because you'll say it in your head. You're like, "Oh, that's a cool sounding name," but your players, when you say it, your players will hear Vicus Dickus, and you'll just and it's done. You're done. That's their name now.
Suddenly their name's Dicks.
Yeah. Yep. That's just how it goes.
Yeah. And if you ever have an animal come around, like especially if you have a druid who can talk to animals, have some weird names on the side. Otherwise you're gonna end up with a bird named Soup.
Oh
yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Yeah. And read those spells, guys, because one of the things that's going to drive you nuts when you have that druid who talks to every animal, the spell says they're still an animal. They're not like a channel for intelligent thought and being. They're still a squirrel. Right. So, if they're talking to a squirrel. They're talking to a squirrel. They'd be like, do you have nuts? Do you have nuts? No. All right. Well, bye.
Go away.
And then,
Go away.
Right. The squirrel is not going to tell your players the epitome and reasoning for the evil bee bag, and
yes.
they wouldn't even know about it.
Yes.
There was a guy who walked by. He was wearing a lot of clinky metal.
He didn't have nuts.
Exactly.
Can you tell me about him? He was big and he had clinky metal on.
Don't let them dictate what's happening in the world.
Right.
Unless it's hilarious, then that's okay. But don't let them dictate how your world's reacting to them. They should only dictate how they react to the world.
So I definitely had a couple of players try to, like, oh yes, I wish to seduce the barmaid, and she swoons,
Oh, right.
And I'll be like,
small
no.
things. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Or dictate dice rolls. The players do not decide when they roll the dice. That is you. You get to decide when they roll
That's
the
a
dice.
big thing. Definitely. Yeah. Not allowing players to really even roll and then say what they do before prompting you. And that, I think that might be a DM preference. I don't know if that's like an official thing, but I know that I personally don't like when someone says, I would like to persuade them I rolled this.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, when did we... What?
Yeah.
And you're kind of left in a position where they're saying, give this to me. And you're allowed to say, well, we didn't, like, that didn't happen. And then you just move on. But
I think the best response in that situation would be, all right, what did you say?
Yeah.
yes.
It's like, I tried to persuade them. How? And then that puts the spotlight for them, because that's obviously they're asking for the spotlight at that point.
Sure.
So, all right, how? And if they don't come up with an answer, you're like, well, that roll's invalid until you can give me an answer.
Definitely.
So
that's a really, really good work around that. I think that's super important.
Yeah, asking them how is big, and then like another big thing with that, that the equation of the dice and when they're rolled, and their effects. One, it says in the rulebook, nat 20s don't count for crits on skill checks. That's a DM preference thing. I don't do crits on skill checks because they're like, I'm gonna run up the side of the building, and I say roll an athletics check. And they're rolling out 20. It's like, well, you're running up a side of a building. But there are classes that do that. Like you're taking stuff away from other classes and possibly other characters. But one of that beware you doing this. But I love doing it with my players, and they hate it. But if they ask to do something that is impossible, I'd be like, okay, all right, roll an athletics check. And as soon as the D20 hits their dice tray, I go, no.
I'll have a slightly different setup for that, and that's if they ask to do something really impossible, you're like, oh yeah, okay, so you want to jump up the wall and you're in full plate? Yeah, sure, okay, go and give me athletics. And they're like, oh cool, I got a 15. All right, now roll me an acrobatics. And they go, okay. And they, oh, I rolled another 15. Oh, okay, now give me another athletics. Oh, well, I got a 7 on that one. So you make it about halfway up the wall, and then you flop backwards on your back, and now you've hurt yourself.
That's smart. Yeah. No, that's really good. I've definitely done that before as well. I've had people trying to, like, swim or swim without breathing, essentially. I've had them do... I crafted, like, a drowning system, which I really enjoy. I've had them do that. She's like, okay, we'll start rolling, because it's been... I don't know, 10 actions, and you haven't gone up for air.
That's a long time to hold.
I know that's a long time. That was me over-exaggerating for sure, but what's a takeaway? What would you like if you had any single don't for any brand new DM? What is the one main thing, minus mental health, because that's number one always?
Don't take away your player's character fantasy. Obviously, when a player comes to you, they have a particular way that they are kind of imagining this character turning out. Perhaps they want to be the fighter who is the hero. Don't make them a villain. Right. If if they are playing the barbarian who wants to be able to cleave things in half, try to give him opportunities to do that. Don't stop him from cleaving things. If there's a like we were talking about earlier, like there are other classes that can do the run up the wall thing. Try not to give everybody someone's power.
Right.
Yeah.
If the monk is in the party and they can run up the wall and the fighter wants to follow him, well, that fighter might not be able to accomplish that without help.
Right.
And if you give that fighter the ability to run up the wall like the monk did, what's the point of being a monk? That's his fantasy, or that player character's fantasy of playing the monk allowed him to get up that wall. Whereas the fighter's fantasy character probably shouldn't be able to do that without help. So keeping in mind what type of player and what type of character that player wants to play, because obviously they chose that class, they chose that race, they chose that character's personality with the intention of playing that particular fantasy. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure you give them that fantasy. Don't take it away from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my big don't play or prep in the wrong mindset. And this can go for DMs and players. What I mean by that is don't ever sit down to prep or play at the table and think it's my story or their story. Players and DMs, it's our story. So prep your games as if it's everyone's story that you're sharing together. And you will have players who will actually sit through a 2.5, 3 year long campaign with you and won't jump ship after 6 weeks because they're playing your story. It's much more rewarding to see your players having fun in hour 3 or hour 4 or hour 6, no matter how long you play. If they're the ones having the most fun, it's actually highly rewarding on the other side of the screen. So prep, play as if it's our story. Everyone's together.
Well, that was super eloquent. Mine's not to overprepare. I have to end it on laughs. It's the rules. But, you guys, this has been a great episode of the Overprepared DM. My name is Jen.
My name is Nick.
And I'm Aaron.
And hopefully we helped you out today. If you're interested in finding us anywhere, you can find me at Jen is Online on every platform you can possibly think of. And you can find Nick over on
Twitter and Instagram. I am EmoAasimar. And on Twitch, Southwest Gaming Society.
And Aaron.
And if you're looking for a long-term game, you can always come over to twitch.tv/questvault. You can find me there along with the whole rest of my crew, and we'll be playing till the end of time.
Till the end of time.
Till the end of time.
Well, to the end of time with you guys, because this podcast is never ending. Bye, everybody. See you next Sunday.
Bye. Have a good day.